A waitress, her hands raw from bleach and her feet aching from a double shift, stands humiliated in the middle of a 5-star restaurant. A billionaire diner has just demanded she be fired, all because she took an urgent, panicked call in her native Russian. She's penniless, alone, and about to be homeless. But that single phone call just set a match to her entire life. Less than 24 hours later, that same waitress, in that same uniform, would be boarding a private Gulfstream jet, leaving the billionaire choking on his words as her old life burned away, revealing a secret he never saw coming. The 6 a.m. alarm was less a sound and more a physical assault. Audrey Whitmore's hand shot out, striking the cheap plastic clock on her nightstand, silencing the shrill beep. For a long, dizzying moment, she simply lay there in the pre-dawn grey of her tiny, 4th-floor walk-up apartment in Queens. The smell of her neighbour's curry from the night before was permanently infused into the drywall. Her back ached from the cheap mattress, a constant, dull throb that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Audrey was 24, but most mornings she felt closer to 50. She was a ghost haunting someone else's life, a life she'd never chosen. She thought of her home, not this cramped box, but the sprawling, sun-drenched apartment in St. Petersburg, the smell of books and her babushkas, grandmother's strong tea. That life felt like a dream, something she'd read in a novel. The reality was this: chipped paint, a radiator that clanged like a warning, and the thin, worn uniform hanging on the back of her door. She dragged herself into the cramped bathroom, splashing icy water on her face. Her reflection stared back, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of cheap concealer could hide. Her blonde hair, which her mother used to say was the colour of wheat fields, was scraped back into a severe, practical bun. It was the face of a survivor. But today, she just felt tired. Her real life was on hold, trapped inside the burner phone, charging on her kitchen counter. Every cent she earned, every punishing double shift she took at Viridian, went into a hidden account. It was for her grandmother, Yelena, who was wasting away in a state-run clinic back in Russia. The clinic was grim, the doctors indifferent. Audrey's cousin, Mikhail, sent her increasingly desperate messages. Yelena wasn't just sick, she was fading, and the care she was receiving was a slow-motion execution. Audrey needed money for a private facility, for bribes, for a miracle. She pulled on her black uniform, the polyester scratching at her skin. She checked her burner phone. A new message from Mikhail, sent an hour ago. They are talking about moving her. Say her case is no longer manageable. This is bad, Audrey. Very bad. They want more money, or they will send her to the state hospital. You know what that is. It's a death sentence. Audrey's stomach clenched so hard it hurt. She typed back, her fingers trembling. I get paid Friday. I can send more then. Tell them to wait. Beg them. Begging doesn't work here, he replied instantly. Only money. She shoved the phone into her apron pocket, the small, hard rectangle, a constant reminder of her failure. She didn't have time for despair. She had a 10-hour shift. The subway ride into Manhattan was a blur of bodies and noise. Audrey stood, wedged between a construction worker and a woman in a designer suit, her mind a million miles away, calculating figures. She was still $2,000 short. $2,000 might as well have been $2 million. Viridian was in Midtown, a sleek, modern cathedral of glass and steel, catering to the financial elite. It was an old-world service, new-world prices. By 11:00 a.m., the lunch rush was beginning. Audrey plastered on what she called her waitress smile, bright, empty, and non-threatening. Welcome to Viridian, sir. May I get you started with some water? We have sparkling or still. Her manager, Brendan, was a slick, nervous man in an ill-fitting suit. He worshipped the wealthy clients and treated the staff like inconvenient furniture. "Audrey, hustle," he hissed as she passed the bar. "Table 4 is complaining about the glare. Go fix it. And smile. You look like your dog just died." Audrey nodded, the smile never wavering. "Right away, Brendan." She spent the next 3 hours in a frantic dance, carrying heavy trays, refilling water glasses, deftly maneuvering around entitlement. She listened to men in $8,000 suits brag about their portfolios, about their Hamptons weekends, about the women they treated as disposable as their napkins. She was invisible, a pair of hands to deliver their steak au poivre and refresh their $300 bottle of Cabernet. Her frenemy, another waitress named Jessica, sidled up to her at the POS station. "You look awful, honey," Jessica said, not unkindly, but with a sharp edge of competitiveness. "Rough night?" "Just tired," Audrey murmured, punching in an order. "Guess who just sat in your section?" Jessica whispered, nodding toward the front. "Table 12. Gregory Shaw." Audrey's blood went cold. Gregory Shaw wasn't just a regular. He was a problem. A real estate developer with a notoriously short temper and a reputation for getting staff fired for sport. He was rude, demanding, and worst of all, an investor in the restaurant group. Brendan treated him like royalty. "Oh, good," Audrey said, her voice flat. "My day is complete." "Just don't speak unless spoken to," Jessica advised, "and whatever you do, don't let him see your phone." Audrey's hand instinctively went to the burner phone in her apron. It felt like a block of ice. She took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and grabbed 2 menus. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said, approaching table 12. "Welcome to Viridian." Gregory Shaw didn't even look up. He was a large man, his face ruddy from expensive wine and sun, wearing a Patek Philippe watch that was worth more than Audrey's entire life savings. He was busy barking at his lunch companion, a young, sycophantic associate named Todd. "And I told him, 'You liquidate, or I will bury you,'" Shaw was saying. He waved a dismissive hand at Audrey. "Water. Voss. Not that sink water you call still. And get it now." Audrey clenched her teeth. "Right away, Mr. Shaw." This was going to be a very, very long day. The next hour was a masterclass in humiliation. Gregory Shaw seemed to have pinpointed Audrey as the sole object for all the day's frustrations. First it was the water. Audrey brought the gleaming bottle of Voss, unopened, and a glass with ice and a lemon wedge, just as he always preferred. "Ice!" Shaw bellowed, as if she had personally insulted him. "Did I ask for ice? Do I look like I want my expensive water diluted? Take it back? And no lemon. Do I look like I have scurvy? Pay attention, sweetheart." "My apologies, sir," Audrey said, her voice a perfect, smooth monotone. She returned with a new bottle and a fresh, empty glass. He snatched the menu from her hand. "What's good? And don't give me that rehearsed speech. I want food, not a press release." "The branzino is excellent today, sir," Audrey suggested. "And the chef is doing a special—" "Fish? You think I want fish?" He laughed, a short, barking sound. "Get me the porterhouse, medium rare. And if it's a shade over, it's coming back, and it's coming out of your paycheck. You understand me?" "Perfectly, sir," Audrey said. "And for you?" she asked, turning to the associate, Todd. Todd, who had been watching his boss with a sickeningly eager smile, immediately mirrored his demeanor. "I'll have what he's having. But medium. And make sure it's quick. We're very busy men." "Of course," Audrey said. She turned to leave. "Hey!" Shaw snapped. She froze, her back to him. Tuck your shirt in. This is a high-class establishment, not some truck stop. Have some self-respect." Audrey looked down. Her shirt was perfectly tucked. It was a power play, a simple act of dominance to remind her of her place. She forced her smile to remain intact. "Yes, sir." She walked back to the kitchen, her hands shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, contained rage. She felt the eyes of the other diners on her, the pity, the mild amusement. She was part of the afternoon's entertainment. She put the order in, and the kitchen chef, a tough-as-nails man named Marco, gave her a sympathetic look. "Sure again, huh? Guy's a piece of work. I'll make sure this steak is perfect, Mia Cara. Don't let him get to you." "Thanks, Marco," she mumbled, but the damage was done. The feeling of helplessness was choking her. It was the same helplessness she felt about her grandmother, trapped, powerless, and forced to endure the cruelty of others. When the food was ready, she carried the heavy plates out. The steaks were, by all accounts, perfect. She placed them down. Shaw immediately took his steak knife and made a small incision. He peered at the meat, a deep, theatrical display of scrutiny. "It's cold," he announced. "Sir?" Audrey asked, baffled. "It just came off the grill. I carried it here myself." "Are you calling me a liar?" Shaw's voice rose, turning heads. "This steak is cold. The plate is hot, but the center is cold. It's disgusting. What did you do? Microwave it?" I assure you, sir, our chef—" "I don't care about your chef." Shaw slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "I care about the $120 steak I'm paying for. Take it back and bring me one that's actually cooked by a professional, not by you." "Mr. Shaw, please," Todd said, his voice a nervous, placating whine. "I'm sure it's fine. Mine is great." "Your standards are low, Todd. That's your problem," Shaw snapped. He shoved the plate toward Audrey. "Now, go." Tears of pure frustration pricked at Audrey's eyes. This was his game. He would send it back twice, maybe 3 times, then demand it be comped. He'd done it before. And every time, Brendan would grovel, apologize, and take the cost of the steak out of Audrey's tips for the shift. She wouldn't make $1 today. And she needed that money. She took the plate. "I will have a new one fired immediately, sir." As she turned, her apron pocket vibrated. A text. She ignored it. It vibrated again, and again, a frantic, insistent buzzing against her hip. It could only be Mikhail. She hurried to the kitchen, handed the plate to a furious Marco, and ducked into the dry storage alcove, pulling out the burner phone. 5 new messages from Mikhail. "Audrey, they are here. 2 men in suits, not doctors. They are talking to the administrator. They are not friendly. They are going to her room. Audrey, answer your phone. It's happening now." A cold dread, far deeper than any workplace humiliation, seized her. Her fingers flew across the keypad. "Mikhail, what do I do? Should I call the police?" "The police are the problem. They are with them. You don't understand. This isn't about the clinic. It's about—" Before he could finish the text, her phone rang. The screen flashed. Mikhail. It wasn't a text vibration. It was a loud, tinny, Eastern European ringtone, a folk song her babushka used to hum. It was the special ringtone Audrey had set for him, loud enough to wake her from a dead sleep. And it was echoing through the restaurant. She had forgotten to put it on vibrate. Audrey fumbled with the phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was still in the main dining room, just steps away from the alcove, but she was exposed. Every head in the restaurant turned. Brendan, at the host stand, looked up, his face a mask of horror. Jessica, holding a tray, stopped dead, and Gregory Shaw, at table 12, slowly lowered his glass of Voss water. His eyes, cold and sharp, zeroed in on Audrey, on the cheap, noisy phone in her trembling hand. "Well, well, well," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "Is my $400 meal less important than your social life, sweetheart?" The phone continued to ring, a desperate, cheerful melody in the tomb-like silence. Audrey's worlds were colliding. Her babushka was in danger. Her job was on the line. She had to answer. Panic, sharp and blinding, erased the entire restaurant. There was no Gregory Shaw, no Brendan, no judgmental stares. There was only the ringing phone and the image of her grandmother, frail and alone, being dragged from a hospital bed by men in suits. Audrey shoved her way into the narrow alcove between the wine cellar and the staff lockers, a space that smelled of cork and industrial disinfectant. Her hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped the phone. She pressed the accept button. "Mikhail, kto sluchilos? Govori." "Mikhail, what happened? Speak." She spoke in a hushed, frantic whisper, her back pressed against the wall as she tried to make herself smaller, to disappear. Mikhail's voice came through the cheap speaker, tinny and breathless with fear. "Audrey, onis des, eto nevraci. Audrey, they're here. They are not doctors." He was running. She could hear the scuff of his shoes and his ragged breathing. "Oni govoriat o protocole activatsi." They are talking about protocol activation. "What protocol? Mikhail, I don't understand. Who are they?" "Ja ne znаю. Oni. I don't know. They—" There was a muffled shout in the background, a deep, authoritative voice. Mikhail cursed, a low, sharp sound. "Sloshay! Listen! They're taking her. They said the safe house is compromised. Audrey, they said her name. Her real name." Audrey's blood turned to ice. No one was supposed to know that name. Yelena Rostova. Not Whitmore. It was the one rule, the one deep, unspoken law of their new lives. Her grandmother was just a simple old woman, a refugee. "This is not about money, Audrey," Mikhail panted, his voice cracking. "It's about you. You have to come. It's the only way. Babushka. She's asking for you. She said to tell you the dove is flying. It's the final protocol. Audrey, ty mnie słyszysz? Audrey, do you hear me?" "The dove is flying," Audrey repeated, the Russian words feeling thick and strange in her mouth. It was a nonsense phrase, a line from a bedtime story her grandmother used to tell her about a captured princess. It was a code. But for what? "I don't have enough money, Mikhail," she whispered, her mind still stuck on the practical A to B problem. "Not for that kind of move. I can't—" "Delonev dengak, sestra. It's not about the money, sister," he yelled, and then the line was filled with a sudden, crashing noise, a door slamming. "Mikhail! Mikhail, are you there?" The line went dead. Audrey stared at the phone, at the call-ended screen. Her heart was a cold, heavy stone in her chest. Compromised. Protocol activation. The dove is flying. It was a language she didn't understand, a key to a door she never knew existed. She felt a single, hot tear trace a path down her cheek. She was too late. She had failed. She took a shaky breath, trying to pull herself back to the restaurant, to the trivial, awful reality of the cold steak and the angry customer. She had to go back out there, apologize, and beg for her job. She stepped out of the alcove, wiping her face with the back of her hand, and ran straight into Gregory Shaw. He wasn't at his table. He was standing right there, blocking her path, his arms crossed over his chest. His associate, Todd, was a few feet behind him, looking terrified. Shaw's face, which had been ruddy with anger, was now pale with a strange, calculating curiosity. His eyes were narrowed. He had been listening. "Well, well, well. he said, his voice a low, mocking drawl. A little international intrigue. What was that? Russian? Sounded angry. Audrey recoiled, clutching the phone. Excuse me, sir. I have to... Protocol activation? Shaw mimicked, his accent a brutal, ugly caricature. Compromised? He took a step closer, invading her space. Audrey could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. What is that? Spy talk? UKGB? Or just some common... what do you call them? An oligarch's girlfriend? Audrey's face flushed, this time with a white-hot, defensive anger. That was a family emergency, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Please let me pass. I don't think so, Shaw said, his voice hardening. He looked past her, raising his voice to a shout that commanded the entire dining room. Brendan, get over here, now! Brendan, who had been hovering by the host stand, practically sprinted over, his face slick with sweat. Mr. Shaw, sir, is everything all right? I'm having a new steak prepared. On the house, of course. And this... He shot Audrey a look of pure venom. This will be handled. I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't good enough, Shaw declared, pointing a thick finger at Audrey. This waitress just took a call in the middle of the floor, yelling in Russian about safe houses and protocols. This is a high-end restaurant, not a boiler room for some scam. Sir, it was my grandmother. She's sick, Audrey pleaded, but her voice was drowned out. I don't care if it was the Pope, Shaw roared. It's unprofessional, it's disruptive, and frankly, it's threatening. In this day and age, in New York City, I don't feel safe. How do we know she's not some kind of asset? Planting bugs, recording us? He turned to Todd. My conversation was sensitive, wasn't it? Very sensitive, Mr. Shaw. Very, Todd agreed immediately. The accusation hung in the air, poisonous and absurd. But in this room, Gregory Shaw's paranoia was law. Brendan, Shaw said, his voice dropping to a cold, final command. I want her out, not just from my table. I want her fired. I want her gone before my new steak arrives, or I'm pulling my investment, and I'm calling the Post to tell them what kind of operation you're running here. Am I clear? Brendan's face went ashen. His professional life was flashing before his eyes. He looked from Shaw's intractable, furious face to Audrey's pale, tear-streaked one. He made his choice in less than a second. Crystal clear, Mr. Shaw, Brendan said. He turned to Audrey, his eyes devoid of any empathy. Audrey, my office. Now. The world seemed to tilt. Audrey could feel every eye in the restaurant fixed on her. The quiet clinking of cutlery had stopped. There was only the low hum of the air conditioning and the thumping of her own heart. Fired. The word echoed in the silence. Fired on the same day her grandmother was being taken. Brendan, please, she whispered, desperation making her voice thin. You don't understand. It was an emergency. My family... Now, Audrey, Brendan repeated, his voice like iron. He grabbed her by the elbow, his fingers digging into her arm, and began to physically steer her away from the dining room. It was the walk of shame. Past table 12, where Gregory Shaw was already settling back into his seat, a smug, satisfied smirk on his face. He picked up his glass of Voss and raised it in a mock toast as she passed. His associate, Todd, quickly busied himself with his napkin, refusing to meet her gaze. She passed Jessica, who was standing by the server station. Jessica's face was a complex mask of pity, relief that it wasn't her, and a tiny, undeniable spark of schadenfreude. Audrey had been the golden child for the last month, the one who never made mistakes. Now she was a pariah. Brendan marched her through the swinging kitchen doors, past Marco, who looked up from the grill with a grimace, and into the cramped, windowless box that served as his office. The room smelled of stale coffee and file folders. He slammed the door and turned on her. The obsequious, groveling manager was gone. In his place was a petty tyrant, terrified and furious. "Are you insane?" he hissed, his voice a low, shaking screech. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Any idea at all? Brendan, my grandmother is in trouble. They're taking her from the hospital. I got a call." "I don't care," he shouted, slamming his hand on his desk, scattering a pile of receipts. "I do not care about your grandmother. I do not care about your family emergency. You know the policy. No. Personal. Phones. On. The floor. Period. And certainly no screaming in a foreign language in front of our most important clientele." He began to pace the tiny room, agitated, running his hands through his thinning hair. "Gregory Shaw. You had to do this in front of Gregory Shaw. He owns 30% of this restaurant group. He could shut us down with a single phone call. He could have me fired. He could have us all out on the street. And you risk that for what? A phone call?" It was not just a phone call. Audrey's voice rose, her own fear and anger finally bubbling over. "It was life and death. You don't know my situation." "And I don't want to know it," Brendan snapped. "Your situation is that you're irresponsible. You're a liability." Mr. Shaw was right. Threatening. Unsafe. That's what he said. That's the word he's going to use when he talks to the board. "I have to do damage control, and that starts with you." He pointed to her apron. "Take it off. And your name tag." Audrey stared at him, stunned into silence. This was really happening. "Take it off now," he commanded. Her fingers felt numb, detached from her body. She fumbled with the knot behind her back, the one she'd tied just that morning, and slowly unwound the strings. She pulled the stained white apron over her head and folded it, a ritual she'd done 1,000 times. She unpinned the small black nameplate that said Audrey. She placed them both on his desk. "Good," he said, not looking at her. He was already typing furiously on his computer, probably crafting an email to corporate, spinning the story. "Clean out your locker. Your final check will be mailed to you, minus, of course, the cost of Mr. Shaw's comped meal." You're taking my tips for that?" she whispered, incredulous. "You're lucky that's all I'm taking," he sneered, finally looking up. His eyes were cold. "I should call security and have you escorted out as a trespasser. But I'll be generous. Go out the staff exit. I don't want anyone seeing you walk back through that dining room." Audrey stood frozen. She had $47 in her bank account. Her rent was due in a week. And her grandmother, God, her grandmother, she had lost, completely. She had lost her job, her income, her last lifeline to saving her babushka. All because of one arrogant, cruel man. "Get out," Brendan said, gesturing to the door. Wordlessly, Audrey turned. She walked out of his office and into the clatter of the kitchen. Marco wouldn't look at her. The dishwashers suddenly found the floor fascinating. She was a leper. She went to the staff locker room, a damp, narrow corridor in the basement. She pulled her cheap cloth coat from her locker and grabbed her worn-out sneakers. She didn't bother changing out of her black pants and white shirt. What was the point? She could follow orders. She could slink out the back alley exit, past the dumpsters and the rats, and disappear into the anonymous New York afternoon. Brendan wanted her to go quietly. Gregory Shaw wanted her erased. But as she stood there, the smell of grease and failure filling her lungs, a different feeling replaced the despair. It was a cold, hard rage, the same rage she'd felt that morning. No, she was not garbage to be taken out with the trash. If she was leaving, She would leave through the front. She straightened her shoulders, wiped the last tear from her face, and pushed open the door to the kitchen. She walked past the line, ignoring Marco's quiet. "Audrey, wait." She pushed through the swinging doors and stepped back into the dining room. The restaurant was quiet again. The diners were back to their meals. Brendan was at table 12, bowing and scraping, personally pouring Mr. Shaw a glass of wine from a new, complimentary bottle. "1,000 apologies, Mr. Shaw," Brendan was saying. "The situation has been neutralized, completely handled." "See that it has," Shaw grunted, lifting the glass. Audrey started walking, not toward the back, but toward the grand, glass and mahogany front doors. Her path would take her directly past table 12. Brendan saw her first. His eyes widened in panic. "Audrey, I told you to use the staff exit," he hissed, starting to move toward her. Shaw turned his head. His smirk returned, wider this time. He was enjoying this. He wanted to see her final, pathetic exit. Audrey kept walking. She held her head high, her gaze fixed on the front door. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of looking at him. She was 10 feet from his table, 5 feet. Just as she was about to pass him, the heavy front doors of Viridian swung open. The chime, usually so polite, sounded like a gong. 2 men entered. They were not customers. They were tall, impeccably dressed in dark, severe suits that were clearly bespoke. The kind of suits that cost more than Brendan's car. One was older, with silver hair and a face like a hawk. The other was younger, built like a linebacker, with a small earpiece. They scanned the room, their eyes cold, assessing, and utterly out of place. The maitre d', used to fawning over hedge fund managers, rushed forward. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Do you have a reservation?" The silver-haired man ignored him. His gaze swept the room, passed over Gregory Shaw without a flicker of recognition, and landed, with unnerving precision, directly on Audrey. He stepped forward, his polished shoes making no sound on the marble floor. He and his companion moved with a silent, synchronized grace that spoke of military training. They walked directly to Audrey, stopping in front of her, creating a human wall between her and Gregory Shaw's table. The silver-haired man looked at her, a brief, assessing glance. "Ms. Anastasia Whitmore?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. His English was perfect, with a faint, unidentifiable European accent. Audrey froze. No one called her Anastasia. "Yes?" she breathed. The man nodded, a short, sharp gesture. "My name is Mr. Kyle. We are from Bainbridge and Calloway. Your grandmother, Yelena Rostova, has activated the summons." He checked his watch, a simple but clearly expensive IWC. "The Gulfstream GX50 is fueled and waiting at Teterboro. We must be airborne in 1 hour." The silence that fell over the Viridian dining room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and noise out of the space. Diners froze, forks halfway to their mouths. Servers stopped pouring wine. Audrey just stared. The words hung in the air, nonsensical. Bainbridge and Calloway, Yelena Rostova, summons, Gulfstream G650, Teterboro. It was as if he were speaking a different language, a language of a world she had only read about, a world of private jets and elite law firms. It was a prank. It had to be. I don't understand," Audrey stammered. "My grandmother, she's in a clinic. She's sick." Mr. Kyle's expression didn't change. It was one of polite, professional impatience. "The clinic was a contingency safe house, Miss Whitmore. It has been compromised. Your grandmother is no longer there. She is secure and awaiting your arrival." He gestured slightly. "We have a car waiting. We must leave now." Behind him, Gregory Shaw made a sound, a disbelieving, scoffing noise. He dropped his fork, It clattered loudly against his plate, breaking the spell. "Now, wait just a minute," Shaw said, his voice booming across the room. He pushed his chair back and stood up, his face flushed with confusion and renewed anger. "What the hell is this? A joke?" He looked from the two suited men to Audrey, who was still standing there in her waitress uniform, holding her cheap coat. This is that waitress, the one I just had fired." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "What is this? Some kind of stunt? Did you call your pimp?" Mr. Kyle turned his head slowly. It was not a fast movement, but it was menacing. He looked Gregory Shaw up and down, a single dismissive glance that took in the expensive suit, the Patek Philippe, the ruddy, arrogant face. And then he looked at him as if he were a piece of gum on his shoe. He did not recognize him. He did not care to. "This is a private family matter, sir," Mr. Kale said, his voice dropping to a glacial cold. "I suggest you return to your meal." "You suggest?" Shaw sputtered, outraged. He was not used to being dismissed. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am Gregory Shaw. I own this block. I'm an investor in this restaurant. I want to know what's going on." At the mention of Shaw's name, Mr. Kale's assistant, the large, silent man, subtly tapped his earpiece. Brendan, who had been frozen in horror, saw his moment. He scurried over, his face a grotesque mask of confusion and terror. "Mr. Shaw, please! Gentlemen, I don't know what this is. Audrey, she was an employee. She's been terminated. She's trespassing." He turned to Mr. Kale. "Sirs, I'm the manager here. This woman is no longer employed by us. You need to leave. I'll have to call security." Mr. Kale didn't even look at Brendan. He kept his eyes on Audrey. "Miss Whitmore, your grandmother is waiting. We are on a strict timeline." The world snapped back into focus for Audrey. The call. "Mikhail. The dove is flying. This wasn't a prank. This was the answer to the call. This was the result of the protocol activation. Her grandmother wasn't a frail old woman in a state-run hospital. She was someone who could summon men like this. Someone who had contingency safe houses and law firms on retainer. Someone who had a Gulf Stream. The humiliation of the past hour, the cowering, the begging, the stinging tears, it all evaporated, replaced by a sudden, dizzying clarity. She looked at Brendan, his face twisted in a pathetic plea. She looked at Gregory Shaw, his face red and sputtering, his power vanishing before his very eyes, and then she looked at Mr. Kale. "I was fired," Audrey said, her voice clear and strong. It carried through the silent room. She looked down at the stained white apron she had been forced to hand over, which Brendan was still clutching in his hand like a soiled rag. She met Brendan's eyes. "I believe you have something of mine." Brendan looked at the apron, then at her, then at the two imposing men, then at Mr. Shaw. He was trapped. Audrey simply waited, her hand extended. Shaking, Brendan held out the apron. Audrey took it from him. She held it up for a moment, the symbol of her servitude, the thing she had been shamed for. Then she let it drop to the marble floor. She turned to Gregory Shaw. She didn't say a word. She just looked at him. She looked at him until his smug, furious expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, of fear. "My coat," Audrey said to Mr. Kyle. "That won't be necessary," the silent assistant said, his voice a low rumble. He was suddenly holding a heavy black cashmere coat. It was not a cheap coat. It looked like it was worth more than her rent for a year. He held it open for her. Audrey slipped her arms in. The lining was silk. It was warm and impos. This was not her life. But it was happening. "Ms. Whitmore," Mr. Cale said, gesturing to the door. They began to walk, the three of them, a phalanx of purpose. They passed table 12. Shaw, speechless for the first time in his life, could only watch. I'll have you know, Shaw stammered, a weak echo of his earlier bluster. I am Gregory Shaw. I'll have your names. I'll have you investigated. Mr. Cale paused at the door. He turned, not his whole body, just his head. Mr. Shaw. Yes, he said, and for the first time, a flicker of something, cold and knowing, entered his eyes. The name is noted. Your file is extensive. Bainbridge and Calloway. We'll be in touch regarding your investments. It was not a promise. It was a threat. Brendan looked like he was going to be sick. Mr. Cale held the door open for Audrey. She stepped out of the oppressive, overheated restaurant and into the cool, crisp November air of New York City. At the curb, a black car was waiting. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a Mercedes Maybach S650, long, sleek and silent, its dark tinted windows reflecting the skyline. The assistant opened the back door. Audrey Whitmore, the fired waitress, still in her black pants and white shirt, took one last look at Viridian. She saw Brendan through the glass, already on his phone, probably calling his boss or his lawyer. She saw Gregory Shaw standing motionless by his table. Then she got in the car. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing off the noise of the city, sealing off her entire former life. The car pulled silently away from the curb, merging into traffic, leaving Gregory Shaw and his cold, comped steak behind. The interior of the Maybach was less a car and more a private lounge. It was silent, insulated from the city's chaos. The seats were buttery soft cream leather, and the air smelled faintly of wood polish and, oddly, tea. Audrey sat, her hands gripping the cashmere coat in her lap. She was in shock, her mind racing, trying to connect the dots. The grime under her fingernails from cleaning a grease trap last night felt obscene in this opulent setting. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Teterboro Airport, New Jersey, Mr. Cale said from the seat opposite her. The flight to Geneva is scheduled for 3:00 p.m. We will make it with time to spare. Geneva? Audrey's head snapped up. Switzerland? But my grandmother. Mikhail, they're in Russia. No, Miss Whitmore, Mr. Cale said patiently, as if explaining a simple fact to a child. They are not. Your cousin Mikhail is currently on a separate transport, en route to Teterboro as we speak. He will be joining you on the flight. Your grandmother is already in Geneva. Already? How? The call. It was an hour ago. He said they were taking her. Indeed, Mr. Cale said. The men in suits your cousin described were not state actors. They were our private security detail. The seizure of the clinic was, in fact, an extraction. A very public and hostile extraction, designed to look like a state-run operation to flush out any potential observers. Your cousin was not fully read into the plan for his own safety. His panic was genuine, which made the distress code he delivered to you more effective. Audrey's mind reeled. A distress code? The dove is flying? Precisely. A signal set up by your grandmother decades ago to inform you that the test was over and the succession protocol was being activated. Audrey shook her head, the words piling up, heavy and meaningless. The test? Mr. Cale, what are you talking about? My life. I'm a waitress. I live in Queens. My babushka is... She's a retired librarian. Her pension was... We had nothing. Mr. Cale leaned forward. His hawk-like features softened. Just a fraction. Ms. Whitmore, Anastasia, what you believe to be your life is a carefully constructed narrative. a legend as we call it in the security world. It was created by your grandmother to protect you. He gestured to the window. You were not born in Queens. You were born in St. Petersburg. But your grandmother is not Whitmore. She is Yelena Rostova. She is not a retired librarian. She is the sole hidden matriarch of the Rostov Foundation. Audrey had heard the name. Rostov. Every Russian had. But it was a myth, a historical footnote. The Rostovs, the pre-revolution industrialists, they were all executed. Their assets were nationalized. Most were, Mr. Cale agreed. But your great-great-grandfather was a visionary. He saw the revolution coming. He spent a decade moving the vast majority of his liquid assets into Swiss banks, New York real estate, and global commodities, all under a labyrinth of shell corporations and neutral third-party trusts. The wealth was preserved. It grew. It evolved. After the fall of the Soviet Union, he continued, your grandmother, Yelena, a brilliant woman who had lived her life posing as a simple party member, activated those assets. She began to reacquire what was lost. The Rostov Foundation is now one of the largest and most discreet private holding companies in the world. Its value is extensive. Audrey felt dizzy. But why? Why me? Why the lie? My apartment, the job, the poverty? It was the test, Mr. Cale said. Your grandmother is a formidable woman. She believes that wealth corrupts. She saw what happened to the new money oligarchs, their children spoiled, weak and vulnerable. She was determined her heir would be different. You were sent to America, given a new identity, and provided with just enough to survive, but not to thrive. She wanted to see if you had her spine, if you would break, if you would become corrupted, or if you would endure. She watched me. Audrey felt a new, cold anger. She let me suffer. She let me scrub floors and be humiliated by men like Gregory Shaw, while she was, sitting on a throne of money? She was testing your character, yes, Mr. Cale said. And as for Mr. Shaw, his file was pulled the moment he invoked his name. He has several outstanding loans on his block of properties. The primary lender, through 3 shell companies, is the Rostov Foundation. Mr. Shaw just threatened his own bank. Audrey stared, speechless. The karmic implications were staggering. The extraction was moved up, Mr. Cale concluded as the car sped onto the highway, leaving the Manhattan skyline behind. A rival, competitor, an oligarch named Boris Volkov had begun to piece together the truth. He was getting close to identifying Yelena. The clinic was no longer safe. It was time to end the test. Your grandmother is dying, Anastasia. This hit harder than the news of the wealth. Dying. But you said she was secure. She is. But her illness is real. She has perhaps 6 months. She has moved her entire operation, her command center, to Geneva, and she has named you her sole heir as her public successor. You are, as of this morning, the new head of the Rostov Foundation. The car pulled off the highway and onto a private access road. Teterboro Airport. Audrey saw it then, parked in a massive private hangar, dwarfing the other jets. A sleek, white and grey Gulfstream G650. The door was open, the steps down. As the Maybach rolled to a stop, the plane's door opened further. A young man, his face pale but relieved, appeared at the top of the stairs. "Mikhail!" Audrey breathed. She scrambled out of the car. "Misha!" She ran up the steps. Her cousin, her only friend in the world, grabbed her, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Audrey. Sestra. You're here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't believe—" "I know," he said, pulling back. I only found out this morning. Our whole lives. Come, Anastasia. A new voice, from inside the cabin. It was a woman's voice, spoken in Russian. It was weak, papery, and thin, but it was laced with the same iron authority Audrey had just heard in Mr. Cale's voice. Audrey stepped inside. The cabin was a mirror of the car. Cream leather, dark wood. It was an office, a bedroom, a living room, all in one. And in the back, in a large reclining chair, sat an old woman. She was wrapped in a cashmere blanket. An IV line was discreetly taped to her parchment-thin hand. She was frail, her hair white and thin. But her eyes were the same ones Audrey remembered from her childhood. Sharp, intelligent, and missing nothing. This was not the simple, doting babushka of her memories. This was Yelena Rostova. Yelena looked her granddaughter up and down, taking in the cheap black pants, the polyester button-down shirt, the raw red hands of a waitress. "You dropped the apron," Yelena said in Russian, her voice a dry rasp. "Good. You have your father's spine." She motioned to Audrey's face. "But you cried. You have your mother's heart. That is acceptable. We can work with that." "Babushka," Audrey whispered, the word feeling strange. "There is no time for sentiment, Anastasia," Yelena said, though her eyes softened for a moment. "Sit. Mr. Cale, tell the pilot we are wheels up in 5 minutes. We have much work to do. You have just inherited a war." Audrey sat in the plush leather seat across from her. She looked at her grandmother, the secret queen. She looked at Mikhail, her co-conspirator. She looked out the window as the heavy door sealed, shutting out the world. The engines whined, a sound Audrey had only ever heard from a distance. The jet began to taxi, smooth and powerful. Audrey Whitmore was gone. Anastasia Rostova, her pockets empty, but her hands full of an unimaginable, terrifying power, was airborne. The Gulf Stream was a world unto itself. As they reached cruising altitude, the transformation began. Mr. Kyle, who had taken a seat at the front of the cabin, became a quiet, efficient administrator. Mikhail, sitting beside Audrey, explained his real role. He had been her minder, tasked with watching her during the test, reporting on her progress, and ensuring she was never in mortal danger. "You knew?" Audrey asked, her voice sharp with a mild sense of betrayal. "I knew we were protected," Mikhail clarified in a low voice. "I knew Babushka was more than she seemed. But this?" He gestured around the cabin. "I thought she was maybe mafia," he whispered with a grim smile. "This is bigger. Crazier. You let me work. Like that?" "It was her one, unbreakable rule, Audrey," he said, his face serious. "No interference. You had to do it on your own. I wanted to help. Every day. Seeing you so tired, so beaten." "I wasn't beaten," Audrey said, her voice hard. "I know," he said, smiling. "That's why you're here." The largest portion of the flight was a brutal, compressed education. After a short rest, Yelena summoned Audrey. Aides produced laptops, files, and thick briefing books. "The foundation," Yelena explained, her voice stronger now, fueled by tea and sheer willpower, "is not a company. It is an organism. It has assets in global shipping, rare earth minerals, and technology. It operates in the light and in the shadows. It is a fortress to protect the Rostov legacy." She pointed a thin finger at a name on a file. "This is Boris Volkov. He is a new money brute. He believes the Rostov line ended in 1918. He has spent a decade trying to find the source of our wealth, which he believes is an unclaimed historical asset. He was the one who found the clinic, planning to abduct me and torture me for the codes. He underestimated me." "So what do we do?" Audrey asked, her mind, so recently occupied with steak temperatures, now grappling with global finance and private wars. "We do not do," Yelena said. "We are. Volkov has exposed his hand. He thinks I am running. He will be loud, clumsy. While he is sending thugs to an empty hospital, our legal teams in London, Zurich, and Delaware are filing simultaneous injunctions, freezing his known assets. We are launching a hostile takeover of the shipping company that constitutes 40% of his net worth. By the time we land in Geneva, Boris Volkov will be a very poor, very confused man." Yelena fixed her with an iron gaze. "Your role, Anastasia, is to be the new face. The test is over. The hidden matriarch phase is over. I am dying. The Foundation needs a leader. You will be that leader." I don't know how," Audrey said, the weight of it all crashing down. "I don't know finance. I don't know law. I know how to balance 10 plates on one arm." "You know how to survive," Yelena corrected her. "You know how to read people. You know how to endure humiliation without breaking. You know how to be invisible, which is the single greatest tool of power. I can teach you finance. I cannot teach you steel. You were born with that. The rest is just details." When they landed in Geneva, it was night. A fleet of black sedans was waiting on the tarmac. There were no customs, no passports. They were driven to a massive, modern estate on the banks of the lake, a fortress of glass and stone. "Welcome home, Miss Rostova," the staff said in unison. The next month was a blur. Audrey, or Anastasia, as she was now called by everyone, was thrown into the fire. Her days started at 5 a.m. Lessons in macroeconomics, international law, asset management, and security protocols. She was given a new wardrobe, a new haircut, a new language, the language of power. She learned, to her shock, that the Rostov Foundation owned the very building her Queen's apartment was in. They had owned the debt of the uniform supply company. Her entire test had been a curated fishbowl. And then, one afternoon, Mr. Kale entered the library where Audrey was studying a hostile takeover bid. "Ms. Rostova," he said, "the New York real estate file you requested. It includes the final disposition on the Viridian Restaurant Group and its primary investor, Mr. Gregory Shaw." Audrey's pen stopped. She slowly closed the file. "Show me." Kyle placed a thin iPad on the desk. "As you know, our call on his loans was effective. Mr. Shaw's portfolio was over-leveraged. He defaulted. We seized the asset. As of this morning, the Rostov Foundation is the 100% owner of the Viridian Restaurant Group." "And Mr. Shaw?" Audrey asked, her voice neutral. "He is ruined," Kyle said, without emotion. "He is in bankruptcy proceedings. His homes, his cars, even his watch, are being liquidated to pay his creditors, of which we are the largest." "So what happens to the restaurant?" "Our hospitality division recommends shuttering it. It's underperforming, and the brand is toxic, thanks to Mr. Shaw's reputation." Audrey was silent for a long time. She thought of Marco, the chef. She thought of the dishwashers, the buses. "No," Audrey said. "We're not closing it. We're going to restructure." She looked up at Kyle. "Liquidate Mr. Shaw's position entirely. Let him know, personally, who his creditor was. Then, I want you to draw up new contracts for the entire staff, all of them. Full health and dental, a 40% wage increase, and a new profit-sharing plan. That will cut into the profit margin significantly, Ms. Rostova," Kyle noted. "I don't care about the profit margin," Audrey said. "I care about the message." She paused. "All of the staff, except for the manager. What was his name?" "Brendan," Kyle supplied. "Brendan," Audrey repeated. "Fire him. Have him escorted out by security. in the middle of the dinner rush, and tell him his personal drama is a liability. Understood, Kyle said. And Mr. Shaw, Audrey said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. Offer him a job. Kyle raised an eyebrow, the first sign of surprise she had ever seen from him. A job, Miss Rostova. His file says he's a developer. The restaurant needs a new coat of paint. Offer him a position on the night shift maintenance crew. Minimum wage. Kyle's thin lips almost smiled. I'm not certain he will accept, ma'am. I know, Audrey said, opening her original file. But I want him to have the choice. I want him to know that I am the one offering. That's all, Kyle. He left her alone in the massive library. Audrey looked out the window at Lake Geneva. She thought of Gregory Shaw, a man who had tried to destroy her over $120 stake, now being offered a job scrubbing floors by the very woman he had humiliated. Her grandmother had been right. She did have her mother's heart. But she was quickly and efficiently learning to use her father's spine. The test was over. Life was beginning. Thank you for watching this story of karma and incredible twists of fate. Audrey's journey shows us that the person you overlook, the one you dismiss, might just be the one holding all the cards. The world is full of hidden royalty, of people whose struggles are just a chapter in a much larger story. Gregory Shaw learned the hard way that you should be careful who you're cruel to. The waitress you fire today might be the one who owns your bank tomorrow. What do you think of Audrey's final decision? Was offering Shaw a job the ultimate karmic justice? Or should she have just let him fade away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. We have new stories just like this one coming out every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for being here.